All right. Hey, Ken, can you hear me? Oh, I thought I'd start, even though I'm not into it. It's Rooibos tea is this South African tea that I just accidentally found at an ethnic specialty store or whatever the heck you want to call it. It's a really nice grocery store near my house. Hold on. I ended up getting the Twinings. It's actually half decent. Anyways, I thought I'd start the streams this way, and then once people kind of kick in, if you can be able to see that. So that's it there. That's the one I get. I think it's some kind of I think it's the plant. It's some kind of weird plant that I guess originally only grew somewhere near South Africa, but now they're because it's become so popular, I guess for people like me as well, which is always, that's the sad thing about global stuff and whatnot. Anyways, I guess it's encroaching on other physical environments because farmers are starting to try to grow it as much as possible. And I think, though, you have to kind of be careful. I was drinking a little too much of it there. I think it can really do damage with your liver or something later on. But it's I just find it's a really nice tea. And very steep tolerant. Like I've accidentally left the bag in sometimes 10 minutes and it tastes fine. I mean, it's obviously extremely strong, but yeah, I thought, Ken, to change it up a little bit, I still haven't heard back from the World War I Museum about the lectures, but I think I may have accidentally replied to like an auto email. So I'll have to see if there's another way to go because I really would like to show the lectures to people. But I thought maybe today we could jumble it up a little bit. And like I said, with hey, Charles, we'll start with Calandale stuff. If anybody else pops in, and then we can get into the Dave Schroeder tutorials. And oh my gosh, like I was mentioning in one of my videos last night, there was surrounded units and everything. I'm like, you know what? This is really important stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go and get rid of myself and then pop on to this full on. And we can start watching Calandale stuff. As you can see, I don't know if you can see the second screen. I just made like a rinky-dink little playlist, and I can just auto-play it and don't have to worry about doing. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this. See how I.
Okay, so starting here the fifth turn of the Central Powers on the German side. See a march forward. I think this is going to destroy this headquarters, which will be gone for 3 months then. That's the entirety of the French offensive ability in the south down there. And that's going to be real tough. Not that there's enough troops. They're going to pretty much be trying to hold the line at this point. But I'm looking at, hey, a German offensive down there looks like it might actually gain some ground. And if I can bulge things in here and bulge things down across here, basically I see two places of interest up in the north. Like I said, I'm trying to isolate the Belgians. I can deal with them with these units that I'm using now to destroy Namur. But I've got some problems. One is the British are at Mons, and that's going to be tough to crack. I mean, I'm not going to crack them, but I am going to try to push through here. I may make an attack on Mons. I'm not sure. I mean, the odds are approximately equal, right? 17. and 16 is in the 30s, and this is going to be 27. No, it's not gonna be much difference. The terrain, they're going to get a benefit from terrain. It's probably not worth attacking under those circumstances, because there are a decent amount of English supply points. It's not like I can drain that. So my goal has to really be to push this way. But one of my goals is to prevent the British from pushing forward. So we're not going to see a bloody Mons, because it's just not worth making attacks anywhere near, parity. That being 3-1, of course. It's not like I've got too many points, I think. If I do, I have to worry about it. I'm at 80. Maybe I do. 110. Oh, there's another 50, 160, another 50. Yeah, I've got to make attack. The Germans have to make some attacks in order to get themselves below that 200 by the end of the Schlieffen Plan era. You can't just slip through. But my goal is to try to crack here. I've got kind of a weak connection here that I wouldn't like, except the Belgians can't do much. I think they can attack it. If they want, they can. Main force is going to take Namur out. I'm going to use artillery to start knocking out Liège. Got some rail conversions going on, slipping into Belgium here. I can't get past Liège right now. And I think I had some going on down here as well, maybe. I'm not sure. That's all Germany, so that seems unlikely. But I remember somewhere I converted a rail hex elsewhere. All right, time to start rolling all the attacks that I want to make. Now, remember, you don't have to make any. So this whole line, I'm just not going to do. In fact, what I ought to be doing is at the end of the month, I'm going to start constructing trenches along there, because I don't want to fight there. I think the French may fall back, though, to their fortress line. It's kind of foolish. Where they have strength, they might as well stay. Back here, they have to retreat to their fortress line. But they do need to pull some of this strength off and get it up north to hook up with the Brits, because otherwise there's a crack in the line here, and I can start getting enough units on the Brits that bad things can happen. Okay, so that headquarters unit was wiped out, and I advanced into the space. But here's the problem. They show up 3 full months. Well, 3 full months, August, 1, 2, 3, that's going to put me in November. Great. But it's in the same turn space. So what I had to do is dig out a little number counter to tell me which turn space to put it in. That may not be a problem for most people, but there's no easy way to track that. I guess you could put a slip of paper under it as well. A little bit of an annoyance, but usually big campaign games do have that kind of issue. Oh boy, a German attack here. And unfortunately, I already took the German losses off. I'll have to replace that. They're going to take 2 less losses. Has actually exceeded the half strength points available for the French. So it's going to force the French to retreat. So essentially, they did enough damage that they did more than half the total strength points. There were 11 strength points here. They did 8 points of damage. So the French take a retreat result, an enforced retreat, which means they take a third less hit points of damage. I don't know how that's rounded. Round fractions to the nearest. That makes it easy. So I subtract 3. So they're only going to take 5 hits of damage instead of the 8 they were supposed to. They have to pull back. And it means that their counterattack, instead of being on the 11, it wouldn't have been anyway, instead of being on the 24 plus 6 is 30 table, is going to be on a lesser table because it's only the 22 table. That's going to cause 2 less losses than I recorded. Anyway, I'll do the bookkeeping there and pull the unit back, and that allows the Germans to advance into a hex. That's the first time we've really seen that, where forces that are actually, a significant defense took half their losses and had to retreat. That's going to change once the entrenchments start going into place, though. Germans punched through at another hex here. There was French artillery there, which can't take the losses early. The infantry has to take the losses first. A retreat was required. The artillery is just destroyed. It's worth 2 demoralization points per strength point of it. So that actually worked out to be a very good attack, hitting where there's artillery. It did remind me, though, as I was looking up, gee, cavalry pay more. And I had to change some of my demoralization points to reflect the extra lost cav that I had taken. All right, well, I've punched a couple little holes through. Oh, sheet. Is that where I attacked? Yeah, I don't seem to have crossed this river. I left in no man's land here. I made the attacks up in the north here. All right, well, let's see what we can do against the Brits and against this kind of weaker French stuff, too. And I was able to do this safe thing, an artillery-only attack on Liège. Since it was only the fortification there, it can't fire back even. That seems a little weird to me because I would think the fortification includes some heavy artillery. But the way it's written here, when only artillery are involved in attack, they may be only counterattacked by defending artillery units. That doesn't seem to include fortifications. So they were able to demolish it from long range at no risk whatsoever, which is kind of cool. That's the end of our German phase. They punched through the fort here. I kind of should have done that as a mobile column attack, because if I had set it up right, I could have followed up with an attack down here, I think, had I done that. But I didn't really set up the numbers for it. I'm kind of waiting for this big stack to come into play. Namur has not fallen, of course. It's slowly been cut in half. Against the Brits here, kind of ran into this wall. It didn't, slightly more losses for the attacker, but not too bad. The reason I went for this one rather than the weaker infantry over here that I might have been able to get to retreat easier was I was a little out of range of my supply wagon here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which would have reduced the strength points for my attack. I could throw in these units over to the side, so I went for that instead. Overall, not a lot of movement. There's not going to be. I mean, this is World War I. Yes, it's the early part, the Schlieffen Plan. We're going to see this slide through, but it's only because there's this huge gap here. The game does not really allow for these broad sweeping movements once the fronts are developed. You're not going to get these breakthroughs, I don't think. Although the rules do try to give some rights to it. And when we see the assault troops, we'll see if that gets better. The rules do give some chance of it. By using the column assaults, you can break a hole in and then march through that and make attacks. So there is some breakthrough capability in this. But once the trenches are in place, it's almost impossible to budge things. I hope. It looks very likely. I mean, it's tough to budge things here. You have to basically wipe them out to get them with the trenches. All right, well, we'll slide this. I don't think I'm set up for any recombinations. I might have one down there. I'll do it if I do. And then we'll slip over to the Entente. Okay, so we enter the Allied turn here, and everything's pretty much released at this point. Well, everything is released at this point. In addition, there's some reinforcements. I noticed something interesting in the reinforcement rules. They've been giving a hex number so far for the early reinforcements. But as things get later, and for the British, for example, there is no hex number indicated in the rule book. So what the rules do specify where they end up. It's just not right in on that list of entries. And it makes sense. It's just it was a little something to have to go look for. So for the French, I think it ends up in any city. German, same thing. Home city, but for the English it has to end up at a controlled port, which would be this. And I wonder what those numbers are on the ports. Those I don't think are explained anywhere. Very interesting. At least not that I know of. Presumably part of the campaign. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get these guys moving. Okay, no counterattacks here. Or no attacks. The French have pulled down here in the south and kind of built some sort of line into place to defend against the Germans. They've still got a strong force here. They pulled back a little bit. You can see some sort of no man's land type territories opening up there to take advantage of the river line. They're hoping that this can't be punctured. If it can be punctured, if the line can be damaged, that puts them in a lot more difficulty. So, for example, these little areas here, the reason they're still there is they have fortifications lines along there. And I don't want to give up a fortification line at all. But on the other hand, the river line is perhaps as valuable. So I may retreat from those fortifications when attacked and reduce my counterattack efficacy, but also really force the Germans to actually push forward and take things on. This is a very thin line here, British and French combined in there. I've got to look at the front definitions. I think eventually I can't maintain this kind of mixed in force together here. I think the segments of the front have to be defined by nationality eventually. But as of right now, I don't believe I'm in the mid or late war area, which is where that takes place. The French do not have to counterattack. I moved some supply points around, 10 points to the 3rd Division or 3rd Army from the 5th. We've got, 28, 40, 51, 64, some 81 points of supply. So I'm under no obligation to get that number down the way the Germans are. The Germans actually have to make some attacks. They certainly want to. They want to try to break this. That's where the weak point is. But they may want to make more attacks as well, just to keep themselves under 200. They're not under that yet. And they've got quite a ways to go with their points. So it's brought up that I shouldn't have launched an all-out assault on Liège. One of the reasons I did, I'm told that's going to cause real problems, the number of troops, I guess, that I lost there, because certainly supply points are not something I'm worried about. We'll see how it works. If I am having trouble keeping the German supply points under 200, it may be because I don't have enough troops that have good attacks over here. And then I have to make some attacks where I wouldn't necessarily want to. Although I had a desire to make attacks down here in the south, it looks like the French have filled that in to some extent. There's still weak spots on that line, and I think I can push some ground, but there's not too much value to attacking there. My goal is Paris. Interestingly enough, looking at the green, so that's why I ran through there. And I was worried I was going too slow. And I'm still going to play as though the Schlieffen plan is in existence, which is I got to break through and I got to make it to Paris. And at some point I may modify that. It may be happening next turn when those troops are going east. But, maybe try to do an outflank or something along those lines just to gain ground. But right now, I still see it as a possibility, and I want to rush and hit as hard as I can to try to get there. But here's what's interesting. The Grand Campaign, the full war scenario, doesn't take into account the possibility of Paris falling. I don't know what's going to happen if I do get Paris, because that would be a major, major blow to France. And I don't think it's well defined in the game. In the Schlieffen plan itself, that's victory, right? You win the game if you take Paris here. I think France and Great. No, it's demoralization point. You don't, but it's plus 4 levels of victory adjustment for taking it, which means France probably, it's the thought here is that France probably would surrender if Paris fell. Would it, wouldn't it? I don't know. Would there be enough points accumulated by that overreach to get Paris to make up for the fact that the Germans are going to be in their place? Not according to the base rules. So if you're playing the base game, you almost have to discard the Schlieffen plan right from the very start, because there's a lot of stuff here that you'd be conquering that's not worth anything. Certainly Lille is going to do some damage to the French. But once you get past Lille, there's not much in terms of valuable territory here. There's some fortresses, but you're probably bypassing these in order to move quickly. And you're really going to be exposing your forces. That's still my goal. Because I don't want to break with that if I think it can happen. So I got to kind of try to balance that in the way I'm playing, because I don't want to discard the Schlieffen plan unless it is, as historically, something that had to be abandoned because it was impossible at that point.
I'm Dave Schroeder. I'm the designer of the Der Weltkrieg series of war games, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the games, show you how interesting they are and how they can really make military history come alive for you, and also to kind of go over some of the basic concepts of the games so that you can quickly get into them. What you see here is a typical map describing a military campaign from a history book. You can tell in general where the armies went, but you can't really tell why they went where they did, or why they ended up where they did, or who opposed them. Right here you see a wargame depiction of the execution of the infamous Schlieffen Plan the Germans used at the start of World War I. This is the same general situation we just saw described by a map from a history book. But here on the game map, you can see the units of the German army moving through Belgium and coming into actual contact with the British and the French. Here on this game map, you see the actual location of opposing units, not just the vague arrows on a minimalist book map. With this information, you can gain real insights into the specifics of the situation faced by the armies of history. Rather than seeing the vague outlines of a map from a history book, war games allow you to see the strength and magnitude of opposing forces, the effects of terrain on movements and combat, and most importantly, the options available to opposing commanders, so that you can gain insight into why important decisions were made and what the options were. Plus, war games allow you to explore the great what-ifs of history. What might have happened if different decisions were made. All right, this is a typical game of the series. Let's take a look inside the box. First thing that we'll notice is a couple of rule books. The thicker one is mostly setups for the game. And we will spend most of the time in this video series looking at the standard rules and explaining to you how you can quickly get set up and play the actual games of the series. Next, you'll find a number of charts and tables. We call them player's aids. Then the pieces of the game that depict the actual combat units and headquarters, as well as markers. And we'll talk about these some more in a little bit. And the last component is the maps. And these are the maps that we play the game on. They're just folded up to fit inside the box. As you've just seen, everything you need to explore the history of a particular campaign comes in the game box. In the rest of the videos of this series, I'll explain the details of the components, how they're used, and help you to quickly get started in playing these games to allow you to explore the options and what-ifs of the great campaigns of history. Hello again, this is Dave Schroeder, the designer of the Der Weltkrieg series. In this video, I'm going to show you and talk about the maps and pieces used in the game. Let's look at the map first. This is the map of the standalone introductory game of the series, Tannenberg, Eagles in the East. This is part of a larger map that's available in the East Front game package. Let's start by looking at the map overall. The playing area here in the center looks kind of like a topographical map. Around the map are various player aids that are usually on separate cards in the other games. Right now, let's look at the terrain key down here in the lower right-hand corner. So this is the close-up of the terrain key at the lower right-hand corner of the map. This shows two things, the terrain types and the map symbols. The terrain types are represented by different patterns that you see on the playing area. For example, this is clear, which is like farmers' fields, broken, which is like light rolling hills, woods, which are rather dense forests, and down here you see lakes and rivers. Over on the other side, you see the description of the different map symbols. For example, the solid brown line is a double track rail line. This, of course, is the symbol for a port. This is the symbol for the international border at the start of World War I. And then the different names for countries, cities, and other terrain features. Now let's zoom in and take a look at the detail of the playing area of the map. The first thing you'll notice about the map is that the playing area is subdivided into a grid of hexagons. These are just called hexes for short. The hexes regulate the position of units and their movement on the board. We use a hex grid because the distance between any two adjacent hexes is the same. If we used a square grid like a chessboard, we would have a problem with diagonals. The hex grid has no diagonal problem. Each hex has a number, and this is how you can tell one hex from another. You'll use these hex numbers when you place pieces on the board to set up the game. The first two digits of the hex tell you which north-south column of hexes to look at. Take a look at hex 1110 right here. The first two digits, 1, 1, tell you that this hex is in the 11th column. Normally the column to the very left of a map is 0, 1, but this map is a truncation of a regular map from the series, and the leftmost column on this map is 0, 8. The last two digits of the hex number, in this case 1, 0, tell you which hex in the column. These last two digits start with 0, 1 at the top or north of the map and increase as you move along the hex row to the south. Now let's look at the terrain. I'll use a large red arrow to point to the terrain I'm describing. The first terrain you see here on the map is clear, like farming fields. Or it could be like this next area here, broken, which is rolling hills or smaller wooded areas. In the next area, which you see here, it's woods, which are thick forests. In this area down here along the river is a swamp. The map also has two types of rivers. The first, like what you see here with the white outline, is a normal river. But back here you see a major river, in this case the Vistula. Major rivers are extremely wide and are major obstacles to movement. The map also has lakes and ocean. Up here you can see the coastline and what is actually the Baltic Sea, while down here is a lake. The maps and games of the Der Weltkrieg series are a little different than those of other war games. In this particular series, each hex side can have different terrain. Take a look at hex 1211, which is pointed at by the red arrow. Notice that the terrain between hex 1211 and 1212 is clear, whereas between 1211 and 1311, there's broken terrain. And again, between 1211 and 1312, the terrain is wooded or woods. This system triples the amount of terrain information on the map and makes the effect of terrain more realistic. You will get used to it quickly as you play the game. Also on the map, you can see the borders between countries. This dark gray dotted line is the border between Germany and Russia at the start of World War I. You can also see the main rail lines, which are the solid brown, or single track rail lines, which are these dotted brown lines. The various terrain features on the map will affect unit movement and combat. For example, as you might guess, it takes longer to cross a dense forest here than it does to move across a farmer's fields. The effects of terrain on movement and combat are described on the terrain effects chart, which is on the back of the rule books. We will look at this chart in a future video when we get into how to move pieces around on the map. The games use pieces to represent the individual units that move on the map. These pieces are called counters. You punch the counters out from the thick rectangular counter sheets they come in. But before you do that, let's look at the individual counter you see here, and I will explain what it tells you about this particular unit. The first thing to notice is the counter's background color. This shows the unit's nationality. In this case here, the gray indicates that it's a German unit. On the counter sheet, you'll see the names of the different nationalities along the side on the background of their nationality's color. Most nations' background color is based on the color of their field uniforms. In the top center of the piece is a large box. The symbol in this box tells you what type of unit the counter represents. In this case, the large X in the box means that it is an infantry unit, as opposed to, say, a cavalry or artillery unit, which have different symbols. Above the symbol box are markings that tell you the size of the unit. The two X's tell you that this unit is a division, which is about 7,500 men, commanded by a major general. To the left of the symbol box, we see the unit's designation. From this number, along with the unit type and size, we can tell that this is the German 3rd Infantry Division. On the bottom half of the counter are the unit's values. The number to the left shows the unit's strength, or relative combat power in terms of strength points. This particular unit has 8 strength points. The number to the right shows the unit's mobility in terms of movement points. Thus, this unit has 5 movement points. And in the upper right-hand corner is the unit's full strength circle. All units of the same type and nationality have the same colored circle with the same value. It shows the full strength value of divisions of this type and nationality. In this case, it is somewhat redundant, as it shows that full strength German infantry divisions have a strength of 8. Before we look at some more pieces, I need to tell you a little bit about how armies are organized. On the piece we had been looking at, I told you that the 2 X's above the symbol box meant that the counter represented a division. In these games, most units are in fact divisions, but some are larger or smaller units. The guide you see here shows the symbols for various sized units, these symbols over here on the left-hand side, and roughly what the makeup of each size of unit is. Note that army does not mean all of the land forces of a particular country. Land forces of a country are typically divided into numbered or named armies. An example of this is the famous American Third Army in World War II that was commanded by General Patton. Numbered or named armies are subdivided into corps, each of which typically contain 2 or 3 divisions. In turn, divisions are comprised of brigades and regiments. Now let's look at a number of other pieces from the Tannenberg introductory game. To the right of another German infantry division is a smaller German brigade. Based on its unit box, we know that this is also an infantry unit. The single X above the box means that it is a brigade. Notice that it only has a quarter of the combat strength of its sister division. The next unit to the right, here, is a Russian infantry division. You can tell this is a Russian unit right away because of the tan background color, as opposed to the German gray. There is no significance to the red Russian unit values. Russian uniforms used a combination of colors, and this is just a reflection of that. The next unit to the right is a German unit of a different type. From the type box containing the single slash, we know that this is a cavalry unit. In this case, it is the German 1st Cavalry Division. The type box is yellow because in the German army, the cavalry uses yellow on their insignia. And the last unit to the right is the Russian 3rd Cavalry Division. Russian and German units have different strengths due to the different equipment their divisions have, as well as the training and ability of their soldiers. German divisions had much more artillery, and their soldiers, and especially their NCOs and officers, were better trained than those in the World War I Russian army. Also, take a minute to look at the reverse side of unit counters. They show the unit at a reduced strength. Units are flipped over to reflect that they've taken losses. And we'll get into that when we get into the combat rules of the game. Just so you know, in other games of this series, you'll have more than just infantry and cavalry units. And here are some examples. The unit with the large dot in its symbol box is a German artillery regiment. The unit with the white E that is on its side, likewise, is a German engineering regiment. Here we see 2 headquarters. These kinds of units stand out because they use national flags instead of unit symbol boxes. Here we have the German 8th Army headquarters, and here below is the Russian 2nd Army headquarters. Notice that the strength value of headquarters are in parentheses. This means that these units cannot use their strength to attack. They have a defensive value only. Each headquarter has a corresponding supply marker. Next to the German 8th Army unit counter is the 8th Army's supply marker. This marker is placed on the supply track to show how much ammunition the headquarters has stockpiled. And we'll get into this when we discuss headquarters and supply. The next counter we will look at has a single value in parentheses. This is a fortress complex. Its symbol is a graphic of an aerial view of a typical fortress. To the left of the fort graphic is an abbreviation of the name of this complex, in this case Lotsen. To the right is the hex number that the complex exists in, and this is the hex that the Lotsen fortress counter is placed in when you set up the game. Fortresses do not have movement points since they are stationary installations. Their strength, in this case 16, is defensive only. Fortresses cannot attack, but if attacked, they will inflict losses on their attackers in proportion to their defensive strength. Lastly, let's look at some markers. The yellow bordered counter seen here is a strength reduction marker. This kind of marker is used to help show strength reductions that can't be accounted for by just flipping a unit over. Using the marker on this side will show that units underneath it have one less strength point than is reflected on their counter. Note that the reverse side of the strength reduction marker is bordered in red and is used to identify units that are half their printed strength. To the right here, we see a demoralization, or DM marker. This is the DM marker used to track German losses and other loss of morale. I'll explain how it's used in a later video. In addition to these markers, the players use the turn and phase markers to keep track of which turn it is and the current phase of the turn.
My name is Indy Nidell, and this channel, The Great War, is going to cover the First World War week by week as it unfolded 100 years later, from today until November 2018, so you can really get a sense of just what happened as it happened. The active weeks, the passive weeks, the weeks of carnage, and the weeks of hope, we'll follow them all one by one. And we've made a couple of special episodes about the prelude to war, so you can get some idea of all of the forces in motion. We've also made a special episode about the assassination of the Archduke and his wife, as it was one of the pivotal moments in our history. All three of these episodes will come out in the next few days. 100 years ago today, on July 28, 1914, the Empire of Austria-Hungary declared war on the Kingdom of Serbia. Now, as you are probably aware, this snowballed within days into the First World War. Now, people often talk about the blank check, when Kaiser Wilhelm said on July 5, 1914, that he would unconditionally support Austria in whatever actions she took against Serbia. And this is seen as the main argument for Germany's responsibility for the war. But this is a little too simple. In the days following the assassination of the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo by the Serb Gavrilo Princip, there were anti-Serbian riots and demonstrations in much of Bosnia, and official dispatches to Vienna that there was Serbian complicity in the plot. But general European reactions to the killings were quite mild. Austria, however, had big ideas, many of them coming from Army Chief of Staff Konrad von Hotzendorf, and I love that name. Konrad was a vehement imperialist for Austria and Austrian greatness. He's also been described as being, quote, the most dangerous kind of officer, both stupid and intensely energetic. There you have it. In fact, in the year and a half before today, 1914, he asked his government to go to war no less than 26 times. And it's very important to note here that his main counterweight, the man who repeatedly urged Emperor Franz Joseph against war with Russia or war with Serbia not to listen to Konrad, was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, now deceased. The assassination was, to Konrad, a heaven-sent means to curb Serbian power and ambition. Now, to understand the next few weeks, we really need to look a bit at both Germany and Russia. In 1912, the Kaiser had told Army Chief of Staff von Moltke and Grand Admiral von Tirpitz that, quote, Austria had to act vigorously against the foreign Slavs. If Russia were to support the Serbs, war would be inevitable for us. Although we think of pre-war Russia today as a backwater, this was not really the case. Russia had become the world's fourth largest economy by 1914. Okay, shortage of money had always meant before that she had never been able to build and equip her army like the Germans could, but more importantly, her railways. By 1914, though, Russian currency was on the gold standard, and the railroads were booming, and Russia would be able to easily and quickly defend her borders in only a few years. Now, this was a big fear in the German high command, since Russia obviously had the manpower advantage. Once her railways were a match for Germany, well, German Chancellor von Bethmann-Hollweg's diary from July 7th tells us these thoughts, that Russia had become a nightmare, and that the German generals say there must be a war before it was too late. By 1917, Germany has no hope, so better 1914. As an aside here, this was the opinion of the generals and some government leaders, but it was not the opinion of the German people at large. You see, Germany had the largest population of socialists in Europe, and they and others comprised a big anti-war segment of society. So the Kaiser wrote on June 30th, The Serbs must be disposed of, and right soon. And he did pledge German support for Austria, and he did tell the Austrian ambassador on July 5th that should war between Austria-Hungary and Russia prove unavoidable, Germany would be at Austria's side. However, and this is really important, he also told his chancellor that he did not think there was a real prospect of war, that Russia was not close to being ready. The next day, he went on his annual 3-week vacation cruise to Norway, which is kind of not what you do if you were basically the most powerful man in the world and you were about to go to a major war. So in spite of it all, a world war was not on the Kaiser's mind. So, on July 7th, the Austro-Hungarian cabinet met to discuss Serbia, and they were for a war to reduce Serbia's size and make her dependent on Austria. On July 13th, a secret report reached Vienna from Sarajevo that there was zero evidence the Serbian government had anything to do with the assassination. Now, this didn't really change anything, but this did. Franz Joseph finally became convinced that Austria could take action against Serbia without any other powers interfering, so he agreed to issue an ultimatum. The terms of the ultimatum were finalized on July 19th. It had a total of 15 demands, and it linked the Belgrade government with the assassination, even without evidence. Now, you can look up the demands yourself, but here are a couple that really stick out. The Serbian government must condemn anti-Austrian propaganda and punish anyone who made or distributed it. And the big one, Austrian officials would participate in the judicial process in Serbia. Yep, they would be in charge of justice in another country. Now, as you may guess, this ultimatum was designed to be rejected. It was sent on July 23rd with 48 hours for Serbia to agree to it. 6 p.m. on July 25th, Serbia answered the ultimatum. She agreed that anti-Austrian propagandists would be punished and subversive movements suppressed, and actually agreed to almost everything else. But as to Austria participating in the judicial process within Serbia, Serbia simply asked that this demand be submitted to the tribunal in The Hague. Now, everybody except Austria thought this response was just fine, but Austria was determined to go to war. Actually, Russia suggested 2 days later that negotiations between her and Vienna should be opened to try and sort things out. This was refused. A British attempt the same day to talk Germany into having a 4-power conference to also try to sort things out was rejected as well. You know what? Here's something that happened then that remained secret until after the war. On July 28th, 100 years ago today, Kaiser Wilhelm finally read the full text of the Austrian ultimatum and Serbia's response, and he could see no reason at all for Austria to declare war. Yep, after all this had happened, the Kaiser wrote, "A great moral victory for Vienna, but with it, every reason for war is removed." And just about an hour after the Kaiser scribbled that in the margins, Emperor Franz Joseph signed a declaration of war on Serbia, confident of German support. And that declaration would turn out to be the death warrant of his own empire. We'll see you next week. Click subscribe to get each and every episode as it comes out. And if you like the show, but English isn't your best language, once again, this show is also available in German and Polish. You can find links to those channels below. Now, I'm sure many of you have comments, ideas, and suggestions. We're happy to hear them. See you next week.
All right, ready to start the 6th turn of August 1914. The Germans just withdrew 26 points of infantry and a couple points of cav that they had fairly close to Army Center 2. They had to do that. I picked any old units because it doesn't seem like the game really allows you to take the desired units out of play, and that's going to cause a confusion issue, I guess, with the upgrades. So I've put these aside over here. Hopefully I'll remember why they're aside, not in the dead bag, and not over there where I'm keeping units that can be rebuilt. This is going to be kind of tricky, but whatever. But at the same time, there's a little pile of new German units coming in here. Almost as many strength points. Some 16 strength points of infantry and an engineer. Unfortunately, those are not right on the line where I can throw them into battle right away. Kind of disturbing that I got to do that, but it's, you know, historically accurate. I'm probably going to slam this Namur again with a combination of guns and troops, although I may push forward with those troops and just leave it to the guns. The problem with that is I want to get my railway as far extended forward as I can. I don't know how important that really is, though. It's important for shifting supplies forward. There's no question there. When do I next get more supplies? I'm getting them here in October. So I've got to have it built by then. But before that, I don't know how big a deal it really is. And I do have another railway, although this may be dashed lines here. See, here it's dashed lines. Here I'm not sure. This looks a little thinner than the others, but I think it's a solid line. Oh, maybe that's maybe that's the double track World War II era, I bet. And I've been building that. Well, that's not going to work. Oh, no, I haven't built it yet. Okay. Yeah, because I just got Liege. And I can build up this way. The World War I, World War II map combination, I think that was a bad idea. I don't know. I can understand having to produce less stuff, but it kind of makes it a little busier than I'd like. All right. So we saw this happen with the British here, where the Germans got a breakthrough. I'm going to show you what happened with the French as well. This was an attack here. About 80 strength points of Germans all supplied, hitting 10 strength points of French. That would be tripled to 30. But what's happened is that after rolling the German losses, they're doing 13 losses. Now, that's more than 50% of these 10 strength points. So they have to withdraw. Since they have to retreat, a required retreat, their strength is not tripled. It's going to be doubled. And now they roll to see how many casualties they do. They're also going to lose their strength points because 13, well, let's see. 13 divided by 3 times 2. They're going to lose 9 of their 10 strength points. That's pretty hefty. They're taking a big hit there, even with the withdrawal. Okay, and I'll figure out what they do. It's going to be an insignificant value of damage to the Germans. Now, I can attack Namur kind of at my leisure here. I have been told, like I said, I should do that to Liege. Well, I'm not in that kind of hurry there, but with Namur, I really needed to get my rail lines constructed by my reckoning. I may be wrong about that. But basically, these don't generate zones of control, so they can pretty much be bypassed. I've just ringed it with a ton of artillery pieces here. I've got to pay the points. It's 38 strength points of artillery, doubled because I'm attacking from more than one hex here using pure artillery fire. That's going to be, well, 4 goes into 38 about 10 times. I can split that between the first and second. I'm going to, well, can I get it all with the second? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I'm going to take all 10 off the second because they have a lot of supplies left. So that ends up at a 76 strength. But here, more than this, so it's the number of infantry divisions that are in the fortress that affects this doubling. I have more hex sides than infantry divisions. There would be no infantry divisions. So I didn't actually have to surround it for that. But what I did get from surrounding it is somewhere or another. I got 1 added to the die roll for each hex side through which artillery units. Well, that's 4. That's the limit, even though I've got 6 hex sides that I'm attacking through. There's no terrain there. The fortress can't fire back. So I'm on a big table against it. And this is how I want to reduce all the fortresses as I go. But it's a slow process, and I may not be able to do that everywhere. Okay, so let's see what we get. We roll the mighty 1. I had been rolling really well. So that's only 5. And now the 26 table. I only do 7 hits to it, so I'll get a 5 there. The Belgians don't have demoralization levels, so I'll just replace the door. Incidentally, I'm doing the same kind of thing here at the fortress underneath this. There's not going to be any fire back because I'm just using artillery fire, but I'm not going to get the doubled strength because there are 3 infantry divisions in there. It doesn't matter how weak they are. I will get a couple of pluses on this on the table though, and I don't know if they get a terrain advantage there. I seem to remember they don't. They're not affected by river. They're affected by other terrain. Okay, so because there's what is that? The broken terrain in that hex, and you can almost see it there. Up on this northern hex side, it looks like there's broken terrain, and there's certainly broken terrain down here on the southern. I can't see now. On the southern hex side here. And you can bring that into play because I'm attacking from adjacent to that. So that's going to be a -1 to the die roll. I'll just add up the artillery strength and make the fire. And here we get one of those situations. I caused 4 hits. Well, I won a 23. Unfortunately, when I look over here, there aren't any counters that I can get that'll get me to a 23. This sucker's a 27. The best I can do to him is a -2. That's 25. Flipped, he's a 21. So I end up taking more losses for the French. One of the few cases with the actual units, this isn't going to be the case. And I pay for that. That's going to be, what, 6 demoralization points because I actually did take those losses. Kind of a painful situation. Plus, no chance to fire back. I'd have to have artillery in that hex to fire back. The fortifications themselves don't include any artillery for some reason. Now, where the southern line is, I was pushing forward with the Germans to try to get into a good position there. But, you know, everywhere where I look, the French are positioned on top of a decent-sized fort or else have a lot of units. This actually probably would be the best place to attack. Let me count and see. Well, my odds are not going to be good there. I can guarantee that. That's a big enough stack that I don't even want to look at it. But these couple little places are on top of big fortresses. I'm bringing some artillery up, siege artillery, to bombard them. I don't have much hope of breaking through there, but I do have a hope of bleeding it a little bit and maybe distracting the French. I do have a significant amount of troops there, so I could punch through. Now I'm going to do some resuscitations. I've gathered up some units here. So I've got 2 strength points here, and this has an 8 circle on it. And this has an 8 circle on it. Oops. This has an 8 circle on it too. So they're the same type of thing. I have only 5 strength points there, but I can combine those and make a 7-point unit. That'll reduce the amount of counter mess that I have, as well as, you know, this is an extra step, a half step. So I'm allowed 6 divisions in a space. Well, that counts as a half a division. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility, a little bit more density to my forces. Maybe it gets rid of some flexibility, but it's really not a big deal at this point. And I can always use my replacement troops to rebuild these things. So these are only 2-pointers. Maybe I want them, but with their slow speed, etc., hey, I just want to feed them into the bigger units. Those are better for an offensive anyway. The littler guys are kind of cool for defense because I can spread them out and even out the troops more. I don't know how much I'm willing to really focus on making sure I have even strength across the board, though. Got some more reinforcements coming on the board, some French Moroccans, some troops rallying to Paris, Marines, and then some English as well up here at the port. I'm ready to stiffen the BEF a little bit. I don't know. Well, the Allied situation has gotten kind of tricky here. I've got another unit I can pull into play. Let's get this up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2. And then 3, I can't move up into zones of control. And that cost me my 7th rail. I used a little bit of rail movement there. I'm never using the full amount, which makes me feel like I'm kind of wasting something. But, well, it means I got more units on the line because the French can't put themselves into the line. What I had to do was fall back from here and try to stretch the line up. You can see I had to leave, I don't know what that town is, Metz? No, it's near Maubeuge. Metz fell already over here. Anyway, and pull back with the English, kind of down south to make them bridge the gap there. Some extra troops up in the north a little bit. The English cav is up there. And basically, I'm not expecting the thrust to be to the north. I'm expecting it to try to break through right here in this salient, or here where it's actually the weakest, and try to turn the flanks in both directions. I got to remember with the Germans to do a column attack because these things are really weak. And by pushing them out of the way, I can then use some breakthrough type action and not have to hit against the hard points in the line. I also shifted some artillery around on the French line with the intention of, hey, it's no fair being able to shell my forts without me shooting back. But the problem with that is the artillery has to take the losses then. And artillery is actually, forts are impossible to repair, but artillery is expensive to repair compared to infantry. So it's kind of a bad situation no matter how you look at it. The advantage, though, is with those fortifications there, it makes it less likely that the artillery is going to have to retreat. Artillery poised with infantry units is very likely to be destroyed because of a retreat. And I had that happen with the one unit up here. And I don't want to see that happen again. That was an expensive loss for no reason. So I'm trying to position them on the strong points. I think that ends my Entente phase. I don't really want to attack, you know. I mean, there's no real compulsion to do so anymore. There's some places where the German line doesn't look terribly strong. Like I could get an attack off here and maybe cause more damage than I take. But I can't afford the losses as the French. And what would happen if I break there? If I break the Germans there and force them back? Do I really want to be there? No. So, you know, it's kind of a, well, my supply points are good for a while. I don't have to worry about losing the game from them. And I want to stretch my line and create some strength wherever it is weakest right now. Part of what I'm doing with that, I'm shifting some of these units off the line in the south and planning on pulling them back. Some places I've got headquarters that are recombining. Oh, I can do that. In order to create some bigger units and fling them up there. I've got to try to protect this because right now I feel like Paris is not going to fall, but the line going through to it is very vulnerable, and I don't think it's a pretty thing for the French.
All right, guys. Hopefully you can, oh yeah, you should be able to hear me. Okay, so hopefully the stream went well. I'm not really much of a camera, like in your face. I think Mike's more of a natural that way. I'm not. I think I've got a face like a blind mother could love to begin with. So I don't know. I'm going to probably end it now. I've got things to do. You guys probably have things to do. Super great to see you. I don't know. I don't know what else to say, for crying out loud. Yeah. What is it? I think there's the boardroom in a few hours from now. Hopefully, Mike, I sent you a link of interesting things that you can do with StreamYard. So hopefully that'll get your creative juices flowing, all that type of stuff. I don't know. I'll talk to you guys soon. I'm super glad that you guys showed up, and I'll see you in a little bit. And hey, Iggy Krickdahl, I think that's how Ardwolf pronounces it. And you know what? I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to pop on later on. If I'm not doing anything, I'll just leave it on the live stream, which was kind of like the way I found out it worked when I was doing like the one way a long time ago there when I wanted to test it. Okay. See you later, guys. And that's it. Bye.